Today marks 100 days until Cyberpunk 2077, and over the last while we have received a lot of new details on the game, ranging from core gameplay mechanics, changes being made to the game since it was last shown off, and it being delayed on a very specific platform. There's a lot to go over here in this video, so let's get into it. Alright, so let's begin with Cyberspace, as there has been some misinformation spreading due to a mistake in translation from a podcast by GameStar, which we'll go more into later on in this video. Here's the quote that I'm talking about directly translated into English. What will be possible in this cyberspace when it comes to depth and features, because the cyberspace in Cyberpunk 2020 is a bit like Skyrim meets Tron. There are weapons like in a fantasy RPG, that you can summon someone who burns out an evil hacker. He scorches his brain and the hacker topples over, or that you throw fireballs and block them with shields. So it sounds like a fantasy RPG in a high-tech environment. A lot of people mistook this quote, when in reality this was just them talking about how it worked in Mike Pondsmith's Cyberpunk 2020, not 2077. I'm not saying this won't be similar to how it actually plays out in the game, but this wasn't them talking about Cyberpunk 2077. So unfortunately, no, Skyrim in a high-tech environment is not confirmed. Now, what is confirmed is a change in the color scheme for the UI that is used in the player menus and actions like hacking. We'd seen a good amount of people criticize the brown vintage look of the UI in the gameplay we have seen so far. Some people like the retro tone, others not so much. It didn't bother me, but I don't absolutely love the color of the UI. Well, according to Miles Tost, senior level designer at CD Projekt Red, that is changing. The UI is seeing a change. He responded to someone on Twitter criticizing the color of the UI by saying, "I'll probably be sniped. Arasaka knows where I live if I say too much. But what I can say about this is, don't worry, making games is an iterative process, smiley face." Implying that the UI has already seen a change, which we'll likely see at the Night City Wire events. Now, whether or not the UI has seen a massive overhaul, or if it's just the color scheme was changed, or if it's just customizable to some extent like seen in Fallout, we'll have to wait and see what those changes are at Night City Wire. It's just good to hear that they have iterated on the UI shown previously to improve it how they see fit. Another bit of small news, and I consider it small news because the majority of you probably won't care about this whatsoever, but Cyberpunk 2077 will no longer be releasing on September 17th. For Google Stadia. This news comes from a now deleted press release by CD Projekt Red where they stated, Cyberpunk 2077 will be released on September 17th, 2020 for PC, Xbox One, and PlayStation 4. By the end of the year, the game will also make its debut on Google Stadia. So while it doesn't sound like it is getting a very long delay as it's still coming out in 2020, it looks like you can no longer expect to be able to play Cyberpunk 2077 on the global launch date for Stadia. Honestly, not that surprised. Now let's get into the juicy details that come to us via the podcast by German game magazine GameStar, which is typically for premium users only, but a Reddit user by the name of Moraes has done the wonderful thing of not only sharing details from the podcast, but also sharing the details in English for one language peasants like me to read. And for those of you that are interested, the developers in this interview are Miles Tost and Philip Weber. Let's begin with the details behind the development of Cyberpunk 2077, as this is what makes the game possible. And I'm sure a lot of you are wondering how CD Projekt Red adapted to the current global situation. And to put it simply, devs obviously had to work from home. So, as awesome as CD Projekt Red is, they sent out over 700 workstations to the devs around the world with Cyberpunk installed. That's not only impressive, but also shows that they're very trusting in those developers. I just thought that that was particularly a very interesting point. Something even more impressive though is the leap this game is seeing from The Witcher 3 in terms of level design. The developers claimed that improvements in the level design are as big as they were from The Witcher 2 to The Witcher 3. And if you've never seen the difference between those two games, it's two entirely different experiences when it comes to level design. So hearing that they believe that the leap from The Witcher 3 to Cyberpunk 2077 will see around the same improvements in level design is very exciting. That isn't it for improvement comparisons to The Witcher 3 though, as there is plenty more. They seem to really love comparing this game to The Witcher 3 and the insane improvements that they've done. Specifically, another detail is that there will be about 3 times as many ways to solve a mission than in The Witcher 3. And while they did try to improve this in The Witcher 3 DLCs, they want to improve it even more in Cyberpunk. For example, some players said the missions when using the Witcher site were too similar and not that interesting. So apparently we won't see those kinds of missions again. Side missions are said to feel much more like main quests in terms of quality. And they also suggested that the only limitation to how a mission can pan out is apparently player death. So to put it simply, you'll have much more freedom when it comes to the missions in the game. And that's no joke to them, because according to Miles, they have no rules about how a quest has to be. So for example, there is no limitations like cannot move more than 1,000 meters, or you have to talk to 2.5 people. The only rule they have, if it's good, we're expanding it and implementing it. And that sounds like a great rule to me. The devs even went further into how they went about developing the quests in this game, and when designing a quest, they actually don't put them aside and work on the next like one might expect. In fact, they continue playing it over and over again until the game releases because they might find something to fix or improve. That's apparently the same way that they did it with The Witcher 3, and it's what they've been doing with Cyberpunk. The devs seem to really strive to get things right for the end product, which is just another thing that gets me really excited to play this game in September. Now, what I would argue is the most mind-blowing detail about Cyberpunk 2077 that we got in this podcast is to do with the random NPCs, as they're planning to improve upon the daily routine system that was slightly featured in The Witcher 3. And how are they improving this? Well, they are giving more than 1,000 NPCs a handmade routine. So there will be plenty of NPCs in this game that will make Night City feel much more believable than a lot of other open world games we've played in the past. But of course, you should still expect the filler NPCs in the game to fill out the world and create the highly populated feel. That won't change, and I don't think it should. Yet another improvement they've made over The Witcher 3 in Cyberpunk is actually toning down the amount of map markers. You may recall that The Witcher 3 had an overwhelming amount of question marks and chest icons on top of all the other map icons. That cluttered mess will no longer be a thing in Cyberpunk 2077. According to the devs, it seems that the main motivator behind this change was because they know some players want to discover every single map icon available. I'm guilty of this, so they are lessening the struggle for those completionists. And last is a big change to the combat in the game, as apparently the melee fighting system shown in the E3 trailer was not nearly where they wanted it. So they say that you can expect some big improvements there. It should be quite interesting to see how all these improvements look during Night City Wire later this month, and just how far the game has come since the last time we saw it. More importantly, I just want to play this game. But in the meantime, I will be making much more regular videos on Cyberpunk 2077, and I'm planning plenty of content for when the game actually comes out. If you want to help support me in making more Cyberpunk 2077 coverage leading up to launch and post-launch, you can click the join button on my channel to become a member, and you'll even get some exclusive perks in return if that interests you. So for those of you that are able and want to show some support for the Cyberpunk 2077 content or just my channel in general, that is an option. I'll hopefully have plenty of behind the scenes and early access to upcoming videos in the next few days. So keep an eye out for that if you decide to become a member. If you're unable to become a member, please do not worry about it. Just simply watching the video and interacting with it is more than enough support. I appreciate it all. I just appreciate that you're here watching this video. But that's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please smack that like button down below, subscribe to the Good Fight if you haven't already, and ring that bell icon to stay updated in all of my future videos. It'd be super greatly appreciated as always. And until next time, this is Epoxy signing off.